In other places, they fished, gathered wild plants, and hunted animals such as buffalo and deer. They killed animals not for sport, but for food, shelter, and clothing. Christopher Columbus arrived in the Americas in 1492. Let's take a look at what life was like in North America just a short time before Columbus got here. We'll have to step back into what we call pre-Columbian times, more than 500 years ago, to meet the first Americans. If you're ready to time travel, let's go. Okay, so you guys, if we come over to the left on page 2, we can see that it says, the first Americans lived in small groups and moved often, always searching for big game. Capturing such large animals required skill and luck. Sometimes animals could be chased into swamps where they sank into mud and were trapped. At other times, an animal might be speared and wounded. Then the hunters tracked it until it died. The ground sloth didn't eat meat. Instead, it used its front legs to pull leaves from trees for breakfast, lunch, and supper. This beast was over 18 feet long, more than 3 times the height of an average adult man. It weighed 3 tons, about as much as 3 small cars. Its giant black legs and tail supported its huge body. Have you guys ever seen a sloth that big? No.
It's 18 feet.
Yep.
It's huge.
So, you guys, you can just imagine, do you think it was easy to hunt these animals? No, they were huge. And so that's why our Native American tribes that we're going to learn about, they stayed together in small groups. Because do you think you could bring down an animal that size on your own? No, you had to work together. All right, let's keep going. Ice Age hunters chipped away flakes of rock until a stone had a sharp edge. Then they took a straight stick that had been peeled and smoothed. They tied the sharpened stone to one end of the stick and made a spear. The woolly mammoth, which I'm sure you guys have heard of woolly mammoths before, was a 10-foot tall, 4-ton elephant. It roamed North America during the Ice Age. Its cousin, the imperial mammoth, which lived on the Great Plains, was even bigger, over 13 feet tall. Mammoths had long, shaggy, reddish-brown outer coats and thick, woolly undercoats. Their fur kept them warm in freezing blizzards. Each mammoth tooth was twice as big as a brick. The shiny tusks of ivory curved upward. So if we look on the next page, you can see some examples of woolly mammoths. I know on the smartboard you can't really see it well, but if you look in your magazine, you can see some of them. Now, we're going to learn a little bit about the location. So, if we look at the top of page 3, it says, many scientists believe that the first people came to North America from Asia about 12,000 years ago, or earlier, by walking over a strip of land called the Bering Land Bridge. Others think people came by boat. Over time, people settled everywhere from Alaska to the tip of South America. So you guys, some scientists believe that at one point we were connected to Asia, kind of by a land bridge. But over time, that bridge either sunk or the ocean level rose to cover it, and that's why it's no longer there. So that's why they think Native Americans, or the first Americans, started out in Asia, and they made their way across this land bridge to what we now call North America, which is pretty interesting when you think about how our countries are formed right now around the globe.
Now we're so far away.
Yes, now we're so far away. Eosius.
Why was it old, why are animals smaller than they were when they were
Well, one reason why animals are smaller now. Well, okay, so first of all, a lot of these large animals have gone extinct. You just can't find them anymore. And so what we have now in some instances are animals that are kind of relatives to those larger animals, but they survived. So they found a way to survive like overhunting and just their population being wiped out. Also, it could be that these larger animals couldn't handle the weather changing to how it is now. Because the weather back then, I'm pretty sure, was cooler. So the warmer weather they may not have been able to survive in. So there's a lot of different reasons why they might not be alive. Their habitat might no longer be available. They might not be able to survive in today's climate, or they might have been overhunted by some group of people. Michael.
What happens if so if people think, some scientists think that we were all one piece because
Mhm.
we brought we brought some of the things from England and then Asia
Yeah.
and Russia to China, and we all brought it together.
Mhm.
But then they think that there was like some underground like volcanoes or something which was the stabilization for everything, and it blew it up. So we all separated, and then we got caught on a piece, and we just
Yeah.
stayed here.
Yep, you're totally right. Some scientists believe at one point all the continents were connected, and then there was some sort of earthquake that caused cracks along the land, and that's what kind of started the process of them moving away from each other. Jack?
I know why the bigger animals, I think I know why.
Why?
The bigger animals are not here anymore.
Why?
Because they hunt those more, because they have more stuff on them, and they can trade off more fur for more clothes. And if they hunt in China, they're going to get a little bit out how much more fur.
Yeah, that's very true. And it even said in our magazine that they killed animals not for sport, but for food, shelter, and clothing. So if you're looking for an animal to supply your food, shelter, and clothing, are you going to go for the small animal or the big animal? Big animal. Mackenzie.
Also, one of the reasons why they're not as big is because they're bold. Like people believe that we used to be monkeys, and then we evolved.
Yeah, we evolved. So it could be that some of these animals, their offspring, their children, they had different characteristics. Maybe their children that they were having were smaller, and so they've just adapted through the years of having kids to being the size that they are now. Good point. Yes, Zoe.
And I'm just seeing this movie, I don't remember what it's called.
Yeah.
But like dragonflies, like it was like about like back then, like dragonflies were huge and like centipedes.
Yep.
And over time, like their food changed, so they got smaller.
Yeah. So maybe their source of food changed and it wasn't able to sustain them being as large. So then, yeah, throughout the generations, they got smaller. Max?
Also, the like survived it was real and their bones couldn't grow and hold on to their body.
Yeah, it could be that they were getting too big for their lifestyle, and so then they were dying off. Yeah? Richie?
So
Okay.
I don't know if you read this, but just check it out. And it says,
Yeah.
when the Ice Age ended, the land bridge connecting Asia and North America disappeared.
Yeah, exactly. So, what some scientists believe is that the ocean level rose and covered it, or some believe that the land itself sunk, and then that just sunk below the ocean, not even just because the ocean was rising. Will?
There were some animals
come back.
that are like, that got extinct in like the 1980s, but they like shot them down.
Yeah, so yeah. So during this time in 1492, people would hunt to survive. But you're right, in modern times, that's why we have restrictions on what animals you can hunt, and if you can hunt them, how many you can hunt, because we're trying to protect animals. So Will, you're right. Some animals have been overhunted and are now extinct. And so that's why today, now we try to protect animals by if there's only a few left, you can't hunt them. And if there are a lot of them, you can only hunt a certain number. Richie, what was your second
Talk
thing?
about extinct.
Yeah.
Were dinosaurs actually real?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And then they went extinct. Yep. We're going to move on to our next two pages. So go ahead and turn our page.
That could also be the reason the asteroid hit. That
Yep.
could also be the reason. That probably was the reason
Yep.
we got an earthquake and then all the places separated.
There are some who believe that they were all connected until an asteroid hit, and that's the same asteroid that took out the dinosaurs. Yep. Yep. Ready to rock.
Ready to roll.
Ready to rock.
Ready to roll.
Okay. So, I'm still waiting. All right. Our next 2 pages, we are learning about the sea people of the Pacific Northwest. So in this magazine, we're going to learn about some of the different groups who were alive during this time. So let's start at the top like we did before. Sea people of the Pacific Northwest. In 1492, the rivers and oceans of the Pacific Northwest were filled with salmon, halibut, and many other fish. Along the shore, people dug for clams and mussels. The area got lots of rain. Tall cedar trees grew in the forests. So did bushes full of tasty berries. Many of the people in the Pacific Northwest farmed, but they didn't need to grow crops to stay alive. They could catch dinner by hook, net, or spear. One group of Native Americans living in the Pacific Northwest in 1492 was the Macaw. Their villages faced the Pacific Ocean. They hunted sea otters, seals, and whales. Guys. Every spring, gray whales and fur seals swam by as they made their way to cold northern waters. When the Macaws saw the whales, they got ready for the hunt. The last whaling canoe is about to leave. Hop aboard for a ride. So guys, why do you think they primarily hunted fish? Why would they do that? Raise your hand. Why? Raise your hand. What do you think? Emmy. Okay. Let's see. Allison? They were easy to catch, easy to hook. What else? Jack L?
They were good food.
They were good.
Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering how, if they killed this picture that was real, but they actually killed the whales like
Yep.
that, how would they get it back to shore in that little tiny boat?
I think we're going to probably talk about that. Okay? Yep. Jack P.
They would have to kill them for food.
Yep, they kill them for food, but why that? It says that they farmed, but they didn't have to farm. Why? Michael?
Didn't they also farm? Well, I think that part of the reason why they also went out to sea and grabbed all the stuff was they probably could have seen most animals glide up on the shore like whales, so they can still hold their breath, but if they need to come up to air, that's why they could probably throw a spear in and catch it, and then some men could dive in and probably use a knife and cut up the meat.
Yep, you're right. They could see the animals as they came in. If you're able to see the animals, does that mean you probably live pretty close to the ocean? Yeah. Remember our question we're supposed to be thinking about? How the environment impacted how these people lived? Do you think if you live close to the ocean, that's probably where you hunted?
Yeah.
So do you think the sea people of the Pacific Northwest live close to the ocean?
Yeah.
Do you think that's why they hunted in the ocean? Yeah. All right. We're going to start on page 4, the far left, the little caption there. Okay. So, the Macaw had canoes of all sizes. Some whaling canoes were 46 feet long and could hold a dozen or more men. Yes. War canoes could be even larger. Smaller one-person canoes were used for river fishing and short trips at sea. So if you guys look, there's an example, that smaller picture, that's an example of one of their canoes. So Jack L's question of, okay, Miss E, if they kill a whale, how on earth are they going to get that back? They would use one of their really large canoes. And do you think they're just going to haul the entire whale in one piece?
There's no way that they could.
They're probably going to separate it into different pieces before they bring it back. And maybe they bring a few whaling canoes and then they can all take part of the whale back together. So then down below, this is how they survived. I know it's not fun always to think about people hunting some animals we really like, but this is how they survived during that time. Let's see. Actually, we're gonna go up here. The head whaler stands tall in the cedar canoe. He plunges his harpoon deep into the whale's side. Again, I know it's not fun, but this is how they survived. Long ropes attached to the harpoon helped the men follow the wounded whale. The whalers would tow the dying whale to shore, where families wait to welcome them home. Macaw sea hunters depended on their harpoons. The tip of the harpoon had a large mussel shell blade. Harpoons also had 2 sharp barbs made of elk bone and antler. Then if we come down below, it says the Macaw lived in 5 villages on the Pacific coast in what is now Washington State. So if you guys look to the back of the room at our Yep, so it's is it yellow? I can't see from here. It's pink. Oh, there it is, yeah. The pink state, it's kind of along there. That's where the Pacific Sea peoples of the Northwest live. Let's keep reading. The biggest was Ozette, near the tip of the Olympic Peninsula. People lived in family groups. Families differed in status or importance. There were royal families and common families. Each family had a leader, and the most powerful of the family leaders acted as chief. Within the family, each person was also ranked by importance. There were rules about how people of different ranks should behave. So within this culture, they had like a royal family and then those kinds of ranks. Now, today, one of the most famous countries we can think of, or well-known countries who has like a monarchy, would be England. So you can kind of think of it like that. That's just how this one group lived, though. Not all of the groups we talk about live like this. Yes, Jack?
Well, we kind of still survive on these kind of things too. We survive on things.
Yeah. You're totally right. But it's not commonplace for you to like, okay, family, let's hop in the canoe and get ourselves a whale. That's not something that we usually do. But during this time, that was something that was readily available to them, so they hunted it. Zoe? Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. You're totally right. All right. So, the Macaw found many uses for the cedar trees from nearby forests. They made the wood into fish hooks, boxes, bowls, and canoe paddles. Whaling canoes were carved from cedar trees. Women wove the bark into skirts, baskets, mats, and ropes. So did they use this bark just for one thing? No. Lots of things. And you guys, that's going to be a pattern we see with all the groups we talk about in this magazine. When they found a resource, whether it was an animal, a tree, anything like that, they used every part of it for many different things. Would you think, like if you think about someone hunting an animal, you would want them to use every part of the animal that they kill, right? That is the respectful and responsible way to hunt, right? So you will find that the groups of people in our magazine, they are responsible and respectful hunters. They don't kill just for fun. They're killing to survive and to use every part of that animal. And we'll even probably talk about some groups who find a way to thank the animal for them being able to survive. Zoe.
I know my dad.
Yeah.
And then they keep the head and then they hang it up on the wall.
Yes, some people do that, but usually they do use every other part of the animal, I have to say. But again, yeah, that's a personal choice. Emmy.
My dad and our other dog passed away a little bit. And our other dog that she passed away a little bit ago.
Yeah.
He and Dutchie always used to go like hunting for like and Dutchie always used to go over like to the pond and always used to just grab one of his dogs and
Yeah. Yep, and so if you have a hunting dog, you train them too to help you hunt. Yeah. Okay. Next section. The macaw didn't just eat the whale's meat and throw the rest away. The barnacles that attached themselves to the whale's skin made a very tasty treat. The macaw turned whalebone and tissue into fishing line and tools of all kinds. They made containers from the whale's intestines, and they used and traded whale oil, which was very valuable. So again, I know it can be hard to talk about, but you guys, we want to be happy that they used all parts of the whale, that they weren't wasteful in just throwing away parts that they could find uses for. Then next to that, we have it pointing at this here, and it says, would you like to go to a party where everyone came home with a great gift?
Yeah.
At a special ceremony called a potluch, I'm guessing, I think that's how you say it, a host showed the social standing of his or her family. Dressed in fancy robes to the left, so you can see an example there, hosts gave their guests a huge meal and beautiful presents, such as fine blankets, carved boxes, and even canoes. The most important guests got the best gifts. So if you think about it during this time, if your host gave you a canoe, was that a big deal?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, think about all that they did in the canoes. Most of their hunting they did in their canoes. So if your host for your party gave you a canoe, that was a huge deal. I know. I want to go to a party and receive a canoe or like clothing or like a basket or something. Yeah. Yeah, goodie bags. Yep, exactly. What's your question, Chanel?
How did they make jars out of intestines?
So basically, if you think about it, no, listen, I'll explain. Ready to rock. So with certain organs, what they could do is, our bodies are very remarkable, right? Would you think that your organs probably have to be pretty strong? Mm-hmm. So if you were to have an organ, what they could do is kind of, to compare it, you know how like you can hollow out a pumpkin?
Yeah.
They could hollow out like an organ and use it to like hold water, for example. I don't know. Maybe they found a way to eat it. That could be. I know it's not fun to think about, but ready to rock? Ready to rock? You guys, could they just go down the street to McDonald's to get food? No. They didn't have that. So they had to use all parts and figure out, okay, what parts of the whale can we eat and what parts can't we eat and can we use for a different purpose. Let's read the last section here and then we can talk a little bit. So, I'm waiting for voices to be off. Okay. The macaw made seal skin and fur into warm clothing. Whale and seal oil were as important as the skin and meat. Villagers dipped dried meat into seal oil before eating it. They also stored berries and seal oil to keep them fresh longer. Whale oil and seal oil were burned to create light, just like candles. When hunting and fishing, the macaw had always taken only what they needed. In the 1800s, white hunters killed so many fur seals that the seals almost died out. So what's the difference here between white hunters and the sea people of the Pacific Northwest? Turn and talk with the people around you. What's the difference? Yeah, Zoe? Now, guys, when it says white hunters killed so many fur seals that the seals almost died out. Does that mean every single white hunter hunted irresponsibly? No, but it means more than one did, right? Yeah, so our sea people of the Pacific Northwest, the Macaw, they as a whole hunted responsibly. But when white settlers came over, they were hunting a lot of native people's food sources. And because of that, and overhunting and not using the entire animal, just hunting for fun, a lot of these people, like the Macaw, they did see that some of the animals they relied on to survive were dwindling. Their populations were going down because white settlers were coming over and hunting for fun. Because if you think about it, if you're a white settler and you come over and you see these massive animals, in this time, they thought, I want to try and hunt it. That's what went through their head. And they didn't think, I want to hunt it and see all the ways I can use it. They just thought, I want to hunt it to see if I can kill it. So, not the most responsible way to hunt, right?
Wow, so they
Right.
eliminated most of our stuff. Good
Yep.
job.
Max. Yep.
When they first made the trees,
Yeah.
people had bones and so had the buffalo.
Yep. No, that's it. Yeah, you're right. Max is right. There used to be giant buffalo even when we had railroads, when trains were becoming extremely popular. And unfortunately, what some people would do was ride the trains and hunt the buffalo, and they would just kill them. They wouldn't even.
Trains and so what?
Yeah.
Shoot out the window.
Yeah, they shoot out the window. So that's why, and I'm sure some of you have gone hunting, and maybe your family hunts, or you know someone who hunts, and I am sure there's someone who tries to use every part of the animal that they kill. They are responsible hunters. Mackenzie.
I know one of my brother's friends goes hunting with his dad.
Yeah.
And then they give the deer to a butcher who gives them the meat.
Yes, a lot of people do that. And so I know some people will butcher their own meat, so they'll do it all themselves. Otherwise, some people maybe don't feel comfortable doing it themselves. They'll bring it to a butcher to make sure it's butchered correctly and every piece can be used. Because what some people do is they'll bring it to a butcher and say, I don't really want the organs, but then the butcher can take the organs and sell them to people who will actually use them. So they're still finding a way to use all parts. I want you to turn and talk to the person next to you about one new thing you learned about America in 1492. Turn and talk.